Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good day and welcome to the show on this Friday, the 23rd of April, 2021. Glad to have you guys here. Now, listen, what's the odds? We were going through a period of economic turmoil in the 1930s. It was called the Great Depression. And we are entering into the front side of a newer, greater Great Depression, very similar to the 1930s, except one big difference. The Depression of the 1930s was caused by deflation. And this depression that we're on the front side of, that we're going to go into, is going to be caused by inflation. That's the only difference. But looking at it on the surface of what it's going to do, it's going to look very, very similar. Bankruptcies everywhere, no work, and people don't have money to buy anything. Just like in the 1930s, they didn't have money to buy anything. Prices were falling back then, but because this is an inflationary depression, prices are going to be rising this time. But the results to people are the same. Very negative. During the 1930s, we had a weather phenomenon that came along called the Dust Bowl. Basically, what it is all through the Midwest, things get really dry. Wind starts to blow, it picks up dust in the air, creates dust storms. Massive dust storms. Let's take a look at this. Let's start the charts right here. Take a look at this. Let's take a look at some pictures. Now, these pictures were taken in the 1930s. Let me focus my camera in here, and we'll take a look at some of these pictures. Just give me a second, guys. I think this picture was taken like in the 1930s. This is a Dust Bowl. Here's another picture from the 1930s of the Dust Bowl. Huge storms of dust. But what does this do to crops? Take a look at this picture. A big dust storm coming through. And this is what it looks like, after. I mean, it's just like, how do people live and stuff like this? I mean, it's just tremendous. The amount of dust that gets in the air during a dust storm, if people have ever lived through it. In the 1930s, people were finding it hard. They were homeless, just like today, but some people were living out of their vehicles. Same things happen today. What's the odds of the Dust Bowl forming in the same? It's like history is repeating itself so closely that it's almost ridiculous, guys. More pictures from the 1930s. Tremendous storms that move through. Sometimes it's fun to take a look at these old pictures, I'll go through on the internet and I'll look at movies and stuff that they took back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, And the people were there. They were vibrant. They were just like the people you have today, but their lives have all passed now. It's almost like we're grass growing in a field or something, and winter comes and the grass all disappears, and then a new generation of grass comes up the next spring. It's new people, new faces, but they're very similar to the people that were there before, way back when, or what we would refer to as our ancestors. But what they had to do to survive during the Dust Bowl, you know? Seriously, homemade masks of tin cans and stuff, to try to keep the dust out of their lungs, as the dust blew through. Now, here's a picture of a modern day dust storm. What goes around comes around. Anyway, so this is where the Dust Bowl is. Let's take a look. Let's put the chart on here. This was the Dust Bowl from the 1930s. And guess what, guys? It's in the same places today. In fact, it's bigger. This time it's bigger. This time it extends all the way up into Canada, into the prairie states. And what's this going to do to food production? Well, it has a very negative effect upon food production, especially crops like wheat production. You know, and when you're already in a hyperinflation, you know what can happen to the price of wheat and grains and corn and everything else that they grow through these areas? Prices. This can help fuel the hyperinflation and higher food prices. We're not just talking pennies higher. We're talking food prices that go through the roof. But what about excess food that we ship? We are a grain basket. North America is a grain basket. Canada and the United States is a grain basket for the rest of the world. What if we've got barely enough to feed ourselves and prices are going through the roof? Where does the shipments there come in to go to other countries and stuff? Perhaps there won't be any left over to go to other countries and stuff. This is a very, very dangerous, very dire situation that we're moving into with this new modern day dust uh, uh, that's actually forming. Let's open up the charts right here a little bit so we can see more of this. Give me a second here. Devastating Dust Bowl heat wave is now more than twice as likely than it was before. The Great Plains Dust Bowl of the 1930s was arguably the most devastating ecological disaster in American history. Turning the prairies into deserts and whipping up killer dust storms, the catastrophe was partly man-made, driven by decades of mismanagement of lands, and fueled by brutal heat waves, years of relentless drought. More than 8 decades later, the summer of 1936 remains the hottest summer on record in the United States. However, new research finds that the latest heat waves that powered the Dust Bowl are now 2.5 times more likely to happen again in our modern climate due to another type of man-made crisis, climate change. Even though it seems like a natural disaster, the groundwork for much of the suffering caused by the Dust Bowl was laid by humans. Until the late 1800s, the Great Plains were covered by endless acres of native grassland, well attuned to the unique climate of the region. That had all changed by the turn of the 20th century, as a series of federal land act enticed pioneers to move to the region and set up farms with the promise of free or cheap land. Cold winters and hot summers and dry, windy climate, the area was considered marginal farmland. But with demand from growing wheat and cattle market, farms quickly replaced deep-rooted grasslands, which normally helped to trap the soil and moisture during the droughts. The decimation of native grassland led to significant loss of both soil moisture and the ability to keep soil in its place. It is estimated that 3 or 4 inches of topsoil was blown away during the 1930s. To make matters worse, some relatively inexperienced farmers engaged in deep plowing of Virginia topsoil and enabled overgrazing. So here's the thing. This is returning again. Right now, at the same time, a depression is getting ready to start. And I can see this thing really revving up at about the same time this depression really gets underway. I'm expecting the depression to come. Now, we're going through a little bit of an economic recovery right now. It's going to last through the end of this year and into next year. First and second quarter of next year, we're still going to be in this little bit of an upturn. And then the inflation is going to turn into hyperinflation in the third and fourth quarter of 2022. This is what I'm expecting. Third and fourth quarter of 2022. It's going to be a very rapid hyperinflationary time and a depression. It's going to cause a depression because people are not going to have the money for discretionary spending. It's just not going to be there. During that period in time, this is when cryptocurrencies is going to come into its own if the government doesn't crush it. And the Bitcoin price could go unfathomably high during that period, the second half of 2022. If you think this rally's been something, you ain't seen nothing yet. And I'm going to tell you something. I don't think this rally's over in cryptocurrencies we're having right now. I think that right now we're going through a little correction within a bull market. I think it's going to take off again. So, for you guys out there who like cryptocurrencies. I don't think this rally's over. I don't think this bull market's over by any stretch of the imagination. I think ultimately, I think we're heading towards setting new highs in cryptos. And we've been in a bull market in cryptos for a little while now. Well, I'm going to tell you, gold and silver haven't seen their bull market yet at all. So we might be halfway through this bull market right now in cryptos. Gold and silver got the whole bull market ahead of them. The whole thing. Thank you guys for listening to my show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the very next episode. Bye-bye.